yeah, I forgot to introduce ourselves. Okay. My name is Jeremiah Grossman. I am the CEO of White Hat Security, Inc. This is Bill Pennington, Senior Security Engineer for White Hat Security. Collectively, we do a lot of R&D and web application security and get to tell you all about what we know about the areas of web application security. Hope you enjoy. If any time you have questions during the talks about whatever, just let us know. We'd be happy to answer whatever you have. So the three topics we're covering today will be web server fingerprinting, how to determine remotely what type of web server is running remotely, and the techniques to do so. We'll be talking about a relatively new issue called cross-site tracing, a variant of cross-site scripting, and also web application forensics, how to determine what's being done to your web application from an outsider, done to your web application by an outsider. So we'll be covering those topics in order, starting with web application fingerprinting. So before we get into all the why fingerprinting type of thing, before we get into fingerprinting, like the technical discussions, why fingerprint in general? Well, we see a lot of web servers out there where the banner's being removed, the banner's being changed on publicly available web servers. Yet when doing penetration tests or patch delivery systems on those particular types of web servers, it's helpful to know or to be able to determine what type of web server is actually running. So there's one reason. So you may also want to determine the configuration settings of a particular web server. Also to further develop techniques on how to counter different fingerprinting techniques as they come out. And it also makes patch delivery easier. Now, how do we go about actually fingerprinting a web server? Well, the method that we came up with was use a standard set or one HTTP request that is standard and supported by all web servers that give you varied responses between web servers on each particular version. So if you're able to send a request, you can actually start signaturing each different web server response and be able to determine the differences. So we got this from Netcraft back in January on the breakdown of web servers in the wild. We'd use this as what we wanted to be able to fingerprint out there, so we didn't have to go to and start fingerprinting like weird web servers that nobody uses. So we stick to these main four. So looking at the protocol in HTTP, we can see highlighted in red the server banner. And as part of this request at the very top there, that's not highlighted, there's an options star request, HTTP/1.1, and we're targeting eBay. And click it. Sorry. So we use the options star request, and we can see the server banner highlighted in red. And there's some other interesting headers in the actual request, like public, options, trace, get. Remember that particular header. There's some other servers that don't have banners, okay? Wiretrip in particular. So we did a head request on Wiretrip, and it didn't give us any server banner. So these are the types of servers when we talk about, we need to fingerprint them to know what they're running. So it's a duplicate slide, but we'll go over it again. So we sent this particular request, options star with a host header, very easy, and we got the following response with a Microsoft IIS4 server banner. So this would be our first way to signature. So click down. So we have the public header highlighted in red, and we'll jump to the next one. We did the same particular type of request on IIS5 and got this output. I believe this was Dell. Dell runs IIS5, and there's two headers on this. And we see the server banner up there, IIS5, and there's now a public header and an allow header with the same set of values, but it was different from the IIS4 values. Okay? Same HTTP request, different output. So to do a quick check, we see a quick analysis between the two. If you're able to send an options star request to a web server that doesn't give up a banner, or the banner might be lying to you, you can use an options star request and distinguish between what's IIS4 and what's IIS5 very, very simply. So in Apache, there's the same problem, if you will. You send an option star to Apache 1.3, you get head options trace in that order. When we go to a 2.0 server, we get head post options trace, but you notice there's no spaces between the values. So now you can see the output is actually different. We're able to distinguish between not only Apache 1.3, 2.0, and also IIS 4 and IIS 5.0, one request standard on all web servers. So I like to use this particular slide because I got this from Tim Mullen when I did a talk on web application security tools back in New Orleans. I was doing a little presentation and I used a particular tool on Tim Mullen's site trying to mess with it. And he's changed his server banner to an HTML tag, which ended up making a spinning skull in my tool during my presentation, so that was nice of him. And but using the public and allow headers that he put in there, I was able to still determine what the particular web server he was running. In this case, it was IIS 5, even though he did a little bit of a registry hack and changed his server banner to HTML. So here's the variances in also Netscape 3.6. The order is different between the previous ones that we saw and between IIS and Apache. So Netscape 3.6, they have just the public header in this one, head get post put, head get put post. And 4.1 they use the allow header in 4.1 with a lot more values in their request in the allowed index, make dir, remove dir, a whole bunch of craziness. So we also have Netscape 6, which is actually exactly the same between 4.1 and 6.0. So you need another particular HTTP request to tell the difference between Apache 4 and Apache 6. So with one simple request, we have enough entropy in the major web servers out there to determine what the major version of a web server is running. It doesn't help us get the minor version yet with one request, but just be able to tell the major version is pretty good at this point. So for reference, here are the major web servers out there and what the response is to an option star request. So if you ever run across a server that you think might be lying to you or you want to find out what it is, throw it an option star, match it up with the list here, and you should be able to determine what it is. It's kind of interesting out there. So what can we conclude? If the web server supports option star, we can, for the most part, determine what the major version of the web server is. It's a very nice little technique. So to get the minor version, we're still doing R&D to get the minor version of Apache. We have some pretty decent internal tools we're releasing in the next couple of months that help out tracking web servers down to a very fine degree, what exactly they are running, what exactly the configs are running, because every web server will react just a little bit differently to the right HTTP request sending. So you don't have to stick to option star. If you have some time, you want to look through change logs or patch differences, you can send your own responses and track the differences between Apache or Apache, IIS, whatever, what have you. So the research, it's not complete. It's really just begun, fingerprinting web servers. We want to get a large, good pool of HTTP requests to Fingerprint, maybe 20 to 30 or so, that are standard across all web servers, generally that are very, very hard to change or configure out of the system without a lot of work. So we want to make sure we have a good set way to signature a web server. So what are the countermeasures to this particular type of technology? What can you do to make sure somebody can't fingerprint you? Well, we have for IIS, we have URL scan. We also have secure IIS and a commercial product by Port80 Software called Server Mask. On the Apache side of the world, we have mod rewrite, some configuration changes, and also you can modify the source. And we'll cover a little of these in depth. So for the most part, in a functional web application environment, you really don't need the options request method. So you can, using URL scan, you can specifically deny it, okay, using those particular options. However, word of caution, Mullen was trying to thwart me and goes, okay, I'm not going to allow anything but getter post. So he ended up breaking his corporate Outlook web access server because it needed search and everything else. So you could set up a quick deny on options, and it'll give you a little bit of distance. On the Apache side of the house, there is the httpd.conf file. Using mod rewrite, you can set a rule to deny option star request using a rewrite rule. Is there any questions on fingerprinting so far, or is it pretty straightforward? Oh, ghost town. Oh, yes.
There's for another countermeasure. I've noticed that some sites out there have you session typing. They'll send you resets if you try to do an option for a foil or a trace.
I haven't seen that one. The gentleman said, actually, if I can repeat it, other countermeasures to fingerprinting, they're sending a reset, like a TCP reset. Is that what product would that be? Or could, okay, particularly MTV.com, is that right? Has this behavior? I want to check that out. Anybody else? Yes, sir. Like I said, we tested. We weren't entirely sure to begin with, and option star was like somewhat of a rudimentary HTTP request we found in RC 1.1, and it looks like it was just implemented in web servers as a way to tell what the web server supports, and that particular request really only does that. We haven't seen much variances like at all. Some web servers, free ones and offbeat ones, they don't support it too well. Like a public file doesn't support it. But the major web servers that we deal with on a daily basis, Apache, IIS, iPlanet, all support it just fine. And it's very, very consistent on any installation that you see. Okay. So we're going to jump to the next topic, cross-site tracing. Might have seen the banter going back and forth on bug track. So just take the opportunity to try to describe what this is. It's very esoteric. I'll do my best to describe it, and hopefully there'll be questions on this and how exactly it works, and in case I do a bad job presenting it. So there's also going to be a code demo at the end, so you can see how the code actually works. Cross-site tracing, what is it to begin with? It's a close variation of cross-site scripting, but it's somewhat removed from that particular type of attack. Now, what does cross-site tracing give you that cross-site scripting doesn't? Okay, personally, I don't like the term cross-site scripting, but it's stuck out there, and that's what we have to use. So it can bypass IE's new HTTP-only cookie security. The HTTP-only cookie security method was implemented, I think, in just IE, where if the server set a cookie with HTTP only, JavaScript or any client-side scripting language cannot access the document.cookie object, the cookie object in the browser. So if your particular website did not use any legitimate JavaScript to access the cookie data, you can actually enforce it in the browser. So it's a little increased security measure that to try to prevent cross-site scripting from only the cookie stealing attacks. So it's a nice little step that Microsoft gave. You can access the basic authentication credentials in the browser, which is, to the best of my knowledge, not before possible. So this is when you go to like some kind of router or some kind of site using basic auth. You have to type in your username and password, and it's base64 encoded, and it's in a header below. Previously, no web client technology was able to access this information. Cross-site tracing now gives you the ability to do so. Very similar access to NT-landman credentials. Very cool little attack. So cross-site tracing has to perform it. Cross-site scripting, to perform cross-site scripting, you needed a vulnerable web application to cross-site scripting. This is no longer true with cross-site tracing. All you need is a web server that supports trace, and they all do by default, all the major versions. So here's where we jump to the requirements. I'm giving you a little background knowledge so we can track the interaction. So what we need for cross-site scripting is a vulnerable web application, a user that will click or view malicious content on a web page. Okay, those are the requirements. Cross-site tracing's requirements are different. All we need is a web server that supports a trace request, a place to host the cross-site tracing code, and if you want to cross the domain on a particular attack, you need a cross-domain browser bug, which is not entirely uncommon. So to just step back for a minute and just briefly go over the steps of cross-site scripting on what happens in a sequence. An attacker inserts code into a site or sends malicious HTML, a malicious HTML link to a user.
I mean, malicious.
Oh, wow. So next, the user views the malicious content or clicks on the link. Okay, that's the user action. The malicious code then is executed in the hosting domain, wherever you got the script from or it's being loaded from. And if you're doing a cookie stealing attack, the cookie data or whatever data the script is grabbing is then passed off to a third party. So it's really about a 4-step process. So cross-site tracing is somewhat different in the way it loops around. So it's good to see this in action. So the attacker sends code to the target site, okay? So this is probably going to get confusing, so somebody, please ask questions if you don't get this. The user then views the malicious code on the site, okay? That code that web page with the scripted code will return to the victim's browser, okay? The code then directs the browser via some cross-site scripting, via some client-side technology to send an arbitrary HTTP trace request to a target domain, be it passport.com, bankofamerica.com, whatever domain you want to attack and get their credentials from, the basic auth stuff, their cookies, whatever you want, okay? Now, the victim at this point has had their browser, without their knowledge, send an HTTP request, a trace request to the domain. At that point, the script now has access to the, so like I said, the basic auth credentials, all the cookie information, and then can be made to send another request to the attacker, passing all that information off-site. Okay, I know I got a lot something. Is there a question so far? Okay, well, let's go forward. So, before I get into the code demo, and I'll show this in action. This is a multi-platform, multi-technology issue. It's not just going to be ActiveX. It's not just going to be Flash. It's going to be every client-side technology that the browser supports. It's also not just one browser issue. It's going to be we have tests running in IE, Mozilla, using Java, and ActiveX. So it's multi-platform, multi-technology, and we're not even entirely certain where the best fix is. But the general remedies, and I'll try to cover them best I can. The best remedies we can come up with after talking with MITRE, CERT, other experts in the field to try to help us through the mess was patch all web browsers, I should say, against domain restriction bypass. This way you can limit the cross-site tracing problem to the domain that they load the cross-site tracing code from. Okay? This is very, very important now. Before it was just minor things. This gets very important at this point. So you also are able to disallow trace requests on the web server. So if the script tries to send a trace request to an off-domain server, hopefully that server will not allow trace. To the best, what we've seen out there, there's no reason to have trace on your web server, by default. But that was easier said than done in most ways to try to turn trace off. So web server vendors will also update their packages, we think, to have trace turned off by default and have it an option to turn it back on. So, let's skip to number 5 there. ActiveX controls or any client-side technology should fiercely restrict their ability to have the browser send arbitrary HTTP requests. That's a whole lot of power to put in the browser. So here's some, again, the code demo will be coming, I promise. So server-specific issues that you can use to fix: IIS URL scan, Apache, you can modify the source, some mod rewrite rules that RFP gave us. And the limit directive that we were trying to play with in Apache didn't work the way we would like. So the only way to limit trace in the code is actually to do a mod rewrite hack, really. So the URL scan configs deny the verb trace, and once again, it might affect some front page stuff. So, skip over this. So the demo. Can you switch? give us 1 minute so we can switch machines. So any questions so far? We'll get to the code demo in a second, but yeah. Good. Is it? Okay, we're actually going to try to make a live HTTP request to a CNET and show it the demo in action. However, the wireless network has been not kind to us. What's going on? Okay, looks like we're having technical difficulties. Give us okay. All right, so we're going to skip over this while I solve the problems here. Sorry about that.
All right, while someone's messing with their Windows laptop, we're going to talk about the exciting and really cool field of web application forensics. Now, whoa, let me blow everybody's ears away first. So the forensics, basically, everybody's kind of familiar with the term. Everybody's familiar with what you do. Generally speaking, most forensics people these days will run some sort of cool tool like Incase, DD, and the majority of the forensics people out there are like sitting around looking for kiddie porn, kind of stuff. Really not so cool stuff to look at. So I got interested in forensics basically not to go do that stuff, but to look at basically network-based attacks and application-based attacks. So I couldn't find any really good tools if I was looking to see if someone was attacking a web application or a web server. There's no good log analysis that I could find. I only found really one document that was talking about web application forensics and how to determine if people were attacking your web application. It was from a company called Sanctum. And basically, it was really short, one page, said buy their product. Wasn't too into that. And I was bored. I was on a consulting gig, sitting in my hotel room, said, hey, what am I going to do? Let's code up some really nasty Perl code and see if I get this thing to work. So, very simple, typical web server environment. What the area we're going to be focusing on today is the web server itself. And you also have logs in the application server and the database server, and these are going to become very important, as we'll see. So what kind of web attacks are we talking about? We're going to be talking about SQL injection, cross-site scripting attacks, parameter tampering, directory traversal attacks, and we can also detect various web server flaws being executed or attempted to be executed, such as Unicode, double decode, and SSL overflows. Basically anything that makes a request to a web browser, we're going to try to detect. So again, avenues of attack. Everybody has a website. Port 80, clear attacks. It's easy to watch with an IDS system. So I could theoretically build IDS rules to watch for some of these attacks. If anybody out here uses IDS, you're probably getting beeped every 5 minutes about someone trying to do a Unicode, double decode attack or something like that. Pretty straightforward. The problem we run into with web applications is 99.9% of the time, they're going to be running over SSL, right? How do I get my IDS box to look at SSL? Yeah, I can put the cert there, I can do all kinds of stuff there, but most of the time, it's not happening. All right, so we're not going to delve into depth on how an HTTP request looks and how it's formed, but you have basically a GET request, gets a object or a file from a web server. It's pretty easy to parse and look at. Everything is logged. Post request, the only thing that's logged is the path, which is kind of a bummer for what we're going to be trying to do, because I can't tell what they're sending into my application. So again, traditional network IDS doesn't work. It's almost impossible to detect certain attacks with network IDS. There's some web attack rules for Snort out there. Basically, they're looking for command.exe, looking for password files going over your network. It's really not what we're talking about here. And again, they can detect code red and IMDA for you all day long. So the only method we have of looking at a web server or a web application attack is with log files. And we have the IIS log files, generally kept in WinNT System 32 logs. And that's what we take a look at here. And then we have the log file format. So this is the standard IIS log file format. You get username, user IP, username, date, time, service, all kinds of good information we can look at. Now, IIS 5 goes to the W3C extended format and the NCSA common file format. They both are supported. So this is one of the limitations you'll see in my tool coming up. So we can also tell by the name of the file what type of log it is. If the file name starts with IN, it's an IIS log file format. If it starts with EX, it's a W3C extended log file format, which kind of means all bets are off on the format, because I can customize that to include whatever data I want to at whatever time. And then we have the NCSA log files, and they begin with NC. I've never actually seen anybody use NCSA log file format on an IIS server before. Apache log files, man, all bets are off, right? Every Unix guy in the world wants to put his log files in some crazy directory somewhere along the line, okay? Generally, they're access log, access_log, something along those lines. The first thing you're probably going to have to do is find the http.conf, https.conf, whichever file they're using, find out where they're storing the log files. So again, by default, they're the NCSA common format or the combined log file format. The nice thing about this is the common file format and the combined log file format that are default in Apache both have the same set of headers in the beginning. So my tool can be pretty stupid when it goes and looks at those. So quick performance tip, if you separate your log files on physical disk from your disk content, you can significantly, well, I wouldn't say significantly, you can probably pretty well increase performance, right? You're not reading static data off of the same place you're trying to write data to on the log file. Every request that comes to your web server is getting written to disk somewhere. Move that to a separate disk, serve your static content off serve all your other content off another hard drive. Preferably another SCSI disk channel, another IDE channel, depending on what you're doing. So, what are the problems with web server logs, right? So they're generally like really, really big. They contain a lot of non-security related entries, right? I got like everybody that requests a JPEG or a PDF from my file, I got to deal with that. It's in there. Post data is rarely logged. We'll get into some tools that log post data, but I've never seen one deployed in the wild that actually logs post data. And again, so many attacks occur via the post request. And some of the attacks that we talked about, you simply cannot determine you're being attacked using a particular attack in a web server log. So let's take a look at some log file sizes. The immensely popular whitehatsec.com had about 466,000 hits between January 22nd and February 19th. An Ecom online gaming company that I used to work for, between February 1st and February 7th, had 1.1 million requests to their bank of web applications. So if I'm a poor forensics guy, I'm going in and trying to figure out what's going on when someone attacked my server, I'm going to have to peel through 1.1 million lines of log files for the web server alone. That's what prompted me to write this little interesting tool. So we'll take a look at what we have here from the White Hat side. So vast majority, 401,000 are images. We had some PDF files up there. We have HTML files, CGI files, cascading style sheets. And then the two one at the top, the odd request and the odd URL, is what we pulled out from using my tool. So what really defines a bad request? Well, we have the response codes from HTTP that we can look at. So 401 tells me somebody required authentication on the HTTP level. So we talked about HTTP basic authentication at the beginning. This is the response code I get back if I try to request a protected resource. 500 response codes can be particularly nasty. Basically, they're server error. If you're getting a lot of 500 response codes in your web server log files, it's very possible you have one, a broken CGI, or two, someone's trying to attack you with SQL injection, assuming you have a SQL backend and all that kind of good stuff. 200 response code is the standard response code for everything's cool. And when you're talking about security, that could be the worst thing of all. So if someone's making a request, doing SQL injection, they're getting a 200 back, that means they've successfully exploited your server. So, got some weird characters here. So some things generally you should not find in a URL. Greater than, less than, apostrophe, asterisk. You generally don't find these things in a GET request URL. I like to do it with the blue hair at the bottom. These are all Google Images searches, by the way. That's how I populate all my slides. So then we have some odd request methods. Generally, 99.9% of the applications, you're only going to see request methods either GET or POST. You know, why is someone trying to send me a head request? Why is Jeremiah doing option star on my web server? What's going on here? Why is my presentation stopped? That's a good question. So let's take a look at some odd request methods. Again, head just returns the server header, doesn't return the actual data. Option star used to fingerprint by my good buddy Jeremiah here. Trace requests, he's going to be doing those as well. And all the web dab methods, it gets really, really freaky, right? Prop find, all kinds of bizarre stuff in OWA. So I came up with a tool called HillBilly. I called it HillBilly because I was stuck in a hotel room, feeling really stupid, writing this tool. So it's not an analysis tool. It's not going to say, this dude hacked me at this time with this exploit. That's not what it does. It's merely a tool to reduce the amount of data I have to look through if I'm doing an investigation. Okay? Searches for odd URL request, 500 errors, and strange request methods. So here's the nasty syntax, because I'm the worst Perl coder in the world. So we have -D, what type of file is it? -L, the log file. -F, where I want my results to go out. -G, to look for the odd GET request. -P, to look for 500 errors. And -O, to look for just the plain odd request methods. All right, so basically the odd request or odd URL search just performs a, most people probably call it a simple regex. That took me like 4 hours to cook up, and it like never hardly worked for quite some time till I talked to somebody that actually knew how to write them. And it's written in longhand, and anybody that knows...
About 2 minutes.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. So basically, it's going to look for a request that contain any characters other than those listed up there. So anything that has anything other than any alphanumeric characters, a period, a question mark, %20 is a URL encoded space, some equal signs, underscores, ampersands, and dashes. So those are all the things that I said, hey, these things probably generally occur in most URLs. So if I'm getting anything that contains something other than these, it might be an attack. Okay? So it pretty rapidly finds your Unicode, double decode, cross-site scripting attacks, SQL injection, directory traversal, all these things, assuming they're over a GET request. So here's what happens when you run it through a log file. We'll see the IP addresses up there. And this is from the White Hat web server here. So you see I have the top 2 or 3. They have a offending slash on the end. We got a good old Unicode attack there, and that's a double decode attack in the middle there. I don't know what the guy in the middle there is doing, requesting a text file with an @localhost thing on the end. Another weird request there. So all these kind of weird requests come in. There's a guy looking for a form mail vulnerability. A couple there. That's nice. Good spammer guy. Form mail CGI. Like that's going to be out there. So here's some of the reductions we get here. So I run the common log file looking for odd request. I get 107 entries. If I do that against the straight log file, again, it's 466,000. So I got a significant difference in the amount of log file data I have to look through. Okay. So in the e-commerce site, basically the log file reduction was a little bit more dramatic. It came from 1.1 million to 285,000. Still a lot of data to look through, but now I have significantly less to look through. So 500 errors. Again, looking for any request that generates a 500 error. Could be indicative of SQL injection attack. If you get a large number of them in a row over a short period of time, again, you either have a broken ASP page, CGI script, or someone's trying to poke at your database backend. So in this case, this is when we need to expand a little bit further from my web application or my web server log. I need to go back and look at the backend, the SQL Server database, or if I have a 3-tier environment, the application server to see what's going on there. And a little hint, your time is synced, right? So you know everything is what's happening on all your servers. So in the odd request types from I got from the e-commerce site, basically 1.1 million reduced to 0. So they were getting no 500 errors on their site, which is probably pretty indicative that they're writing good code and they're writing good filters on the front end. So they're not letting any odd request in. So anything other than get and post, we can look at that by slashing on the -O on the end. So basically what we're looking for here is probing request or someone firing another odd HTTP client at me. So basically when we ran that against the e-commerce site, we got it reduced from 1.1 million to 2,000. So pretty nice reduction there. Now I have no idea if that was actually right or not. I just like stripped out a bunch of random characters. So, ooh, tough crowd. All right, so let's prepare for the worst. So we need to configure our log server files. We need to know where they are, what they're doing, and what they're logging. We can pop on some additional tools. We've been pimping URL scan all day, so might as well keep doing that. Mod Protect, which is an Apache module that will actually log post request. And And we have Code Seeker, which is up on the OWASP site. It's a web application firewall. You can also use that to limit request, and probably log post data. So the other logs you need to look at are SQL Server logs, because again, if I'm getting 500 requests, I should be logging on my SQL Server. Your DBA will whine incessantly about performance if you do this. And application server logs, if you're using a 3-tier environment, make sure they're on, make sure you understand what they're saying. And again, you got your time synced, right? Everybody has that. I shouldn't even worry about that. All your time is correct. So, HillBillies and IDS. This is something I cooked up probably after not a lot of sleep with Apache. You can do a custom log file. You can actually run it through my Perl script, output it to another log. Probably the worst thing you could do to your website, but I wanted to throw it out there because I thought it was cool. All right, so future plans for HillBilly. Write some code that actually other people can read and use. We're going to release it, and you can take a look at it, but it's a little flaky. So recognize and automatically parse web server logs. IIS, if you're using W3C extended, actually puts the format of the log file on top of the log file. So we should be able to parse that, quickly fill in where we need to fill in, and take a look at the log files. Another thing right now that HillBilly doesn't do is it will parse through and look for all the odd requests, whether they were successful requests or not. So if someone requested something, it gave me a 404 error. If it gave me some other error other than 200 or other than 500, I throw it up there anyways. I don't really care, right? So it's probably, you could throw on an option that only look for successful requests and limit the amount of data you have to look through tremendously. And again, some sort of magic to profile the log and actually look for truly deviant requests. This might not work so well on a live internet site, but what I'm thinking here is if you could take your dev environment, run log files from your dev environment through this, then run your production log files, you can see the truly deviant request coming out of your log file. I got hooked up on Bayesian filters for spam filtering for a while, so this is where I was trying to go. And then I looked at that and figured out I was way too stupid to be dealing with that. Pretty output. Right now, it's really horrible output. So, anybody have any questions? Like, Colingo, ¿dónde está mi coche? I don't know. I don't even know where I found that. Have any questions? We rolled through that really quickly. You have your demo up? All right, we're going to give this a shot again.
All right, this is a restored install from, this is a Sony Vaio here. So this is the first XB that you get on the machine. It's a clean install. For those that are not entirely familiar with JavaScript, I just put in the JavaScript that we're using behind the 3 buttons. So the normal cookie button, don't click on it yet. It sets a cookie in the localhost domain to the cookie name as the cookie name and the cookie value as the cookie value, and then proceeds to alert you to show that the cookie actually got set. So tag button. So we see that a cookie got made and it alerted it. So you can close that. Now we're going to take a look at the IE only security mechanism for HTTP only. It's a little option, kind of like persistent cookies or secure cookies. You put HTTP only at the end. You do the same type of cookie set, hit it, and you notice that the string returns empty. Okay? So HTTP only prevents JavaScript from actually reading the cookie data when HTTP only is on. It's interesting to note some weird behavior I saw. I saw that IE would not let you read the data, but you could actually still overwrite the data. I don't know exactly what that means yet, but it was kind of interesting. So hit the show cookie once. And so we can see that the cookie is still being protected by HTTP only. So we'll skip on down to the bottom. Here's where cross-site tracing comes into play. The first function up on top there uses an ActiveX object, Microsoft XML HTTP, some very simple ActiveX control, to send a trace request to a web server that's actually on this particular box. Okay? And after it sends the request, it takes the response text from the web server that you get and alerts it. So we'll see an output from the web server after we sent the trace request. So we sent the trace to the web server. It popped back, okay? And we're actually able to see the cookie data even though it's being protected by HTTP only. So we actually bypassed the HTTP only protection using a trace request, since this is what actually came back from the server. Okay, one second. Hit it again. Now, had we authenticated to the particular localhost web server via basic authentication headers would have been in that alert, just like your NTLM stuff and everything else. Everything that the server will respond with is in this. So we no longer need document.cookie to grab cookie data. We can now access basic authentication credentials, all using ActiveX, Flash, or whatever you want. Anything that allows you to send an arbitrary HTTP request. Okay. Here's where it gets infinitely more dangerous, okay? Because that particular code can reside on any public web server. So let's say you're able to host content on a large portal. There's a lot of them, and you can get somebody to see your page. You can actually pick up any of their cookies, basic auth credentials, anything you want. When you're able to read somebody's page and view this code, which uses a known domain restriction bypass bug, it will actually connect, don't touch it yet, don't touch it. It will actually connect to CNET and send a trace request to them, and you'll see what comes back. No, not yet. Let's go to cnet.com, right in the other browser window on the taskbar, and just hit reload. So CNET, when you go to cnet.com, it sends you, it cookies you automatically. So we know we have a cookie in the system. So jump back over to the other browser and hit the cross-site trace. Wait, actually, one second. Hit show cookie again. So we're still not able to see the cookie data using JavaScript. So hit the button. Now you go. Yeah, I'm sure. Positive. No! So right now, using this page, we're actually able to send a cross-site trace domain restriction bypass bug, bypass the HTTP-only cookie security, and grab CNET's cookie using a trace request, because CNET was nice enough to send it back after sending them a trace request. Everybody follow along? Okay. So this is where this particular attack gets dangerous. You can now, okay, at this point, I'll reiterate, you do not, to cross-site script, if you want to call this a cross-site scripting attack, you do not need a vulnerable web application. So over the last 4 years, most of us have spent way too much time trying to kill off vulnerable web applications, actually kill off vulnerabilities to cross-site scripting in our apps. The problem with this one is we no longer need a vulnerable web app to perform a cross-site trace. All we need is a trace supporting web server. So it gets very, very dangerous. Now, that's roughly it. That's really all there is to it. Yes?
Will that work with the browser
At
at current patch levels?
current patch levels, if you had a live domain restriction bug and they come up like every couple of weeks, it's the same type of attack. And it's not just, remember, it's not just ActiveX or IE. If Flash will allow you to do it, if Java will allow you to do it, it's really just an arbitrary trace request and it'll echo back. So it's not just like this particular code. This is just how I coded one as a proof of concept, really. I'm not up to like the current IE bugs out there. This is just one that I knew worked. So.
I asked because last week I was playing with XML HTTP, and when the remote server tries to go get IE points.
Right. Oh, I'm sorry. He asked if this particular current attack works with current patch levels. The attack methodology works. Whether or not using this particular implementation of the attack, probably not. They might have fixed it. I really couldn't say for sure. But as I was commenting, you could still use Flash, still use Java, another IE control if you want. Anything that it supports. It's just HTTP at that point. In there. Yes, sir?
You know, for what server is currently recited the Fingerprint?
All of them by default. It's in the HTTP 1.1 RFC, except for public file. So the trace request, it's really just an HTTP echo. You send a trace request with whatever you want, and it echoes back with whatever you gave it. It's very simple. So you're just bypassing, I don't no longer need document.cookie to get whatever I want. You got a question?
Just an observation that all of these efforts to plug this to the client side are more or less wasted time. Tricky as the servers with respect to any protocol.
See, this is like a matter of like some concern, some controversy, I guess. I spoke to a lot of people trying to figure out where the fix is, whose problem it is. And it might be the browser's problem, it might be the technology's problem, it might be the web server's problem, and it also might be the RFC's problem. In the end, the best solution I could figure out, with consensus, is to disallow trace. Because if you could fix it on the browser side all day, where the basic problem is, you're relying on the client side security at that point to secure your, to make sure you're secure. Not the position I want to be in personally.
Once the server lets the data go, it's out there.
Yeah, it's over the wire. It's there. Anybody else? Okay, I think I'm sorry we're way under time, and yes, sir. It looks just like the question from the back was, what does it look like in the logs? It just looks like well, most logs don't log headers in the log file, so you get like a get slash normally at HTTP 1.1. It just looks like a trace slash, whatever you want to give it. It says trace. I mean, you can see people are tracing you.
Yeah, my tool will find it. So.
Yeah. So it just looks like a trace request. Any other questions? All right. Yeah. If you have any questions, actually, do we have like materials up somewhere? Or?
Yeah, so materials will be up on our website, www.whitehatstack.com.
As soon as we get down to the valley.
Yeah, as soon as we get back home. So it'll be next week.
And if you have any questions, email is good.
Dude, it's my spotlight. Check it out.
Sorry.
So I'm sure you're all going to want to get a video cassette copy or a CD-ROM of our riveting performance. So Sound of Knowledge has them outside. We've been asked to announce that. And there's a big shindig at 6 o'clock on the 30-some-odd floor, top of the building. So you can, now that we've cut short time, you can go upstairs, you can shower, you can relax, and then come down and drink heavily. So.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. We appreciate being here.